Laughing at billionaires, it's a wonderful pastime. All right, thank you. Welcome to Laughing at Billionaires, our little podcast where we look at the sad frailty of billionaires and the epic ego that it takes to think that you should have $1 billion. We're going to look at Yvon Chouinard, the CEO of Patagonia. He's sort of a gray billionaire. He's still a billionaire. I'll explain why. It's a little depressing. I think what's so hard is that people have been taught that if you make a lot of money, if you have a lot of power, you are a special person. What makes you special is that you have a lot of money and you have a lot of power. And that means that you can do a lot of things, and it makes your limited perspective the dominant one in the world. And I think whatever we can do to make sure that people's perspectives are operating appropriately to them just being one human being on this earth rather than counting for so much more than other people is probably a good thing. Yes, some people have specialized knowledge of certain areas. Most people do. But that shouldn't be, that perspective of theirs doesn't deserve this much influence and this much power and this much money to shade the world. So let's go through billionaire news. It's fun as always. First off, Jim Davis sucks. He owns New Balance. He donates to Trump. Don't buy New Balance. Simple, simple. In other billionaire stories, BNSF, the railroad owned by Warren Buffett, has sent a letter to Congress urging them to pass legislation that would force rail workers to adopt a contract that contains zero paid or unpaid sick leaves. Inside of it, it says, first, the good news is that the railroads have now reached tentative agreements with the large majority of rail unions involved in national negotiations. One point of apparent confusion about regarding time off and sick leave continues to be issues around vacation and sick leave for railroad engineers and conductors, and specifically a contention that they get no sick days or paid time off. This is simply not accurate, and in fact, the PEB reviewed and decided on these issues in their recommendations. The PEB did not miss something on this topic, as some have suggested, and this issue should not prevent the parties from reaching voluntary agreements. Now let's hear what it's actually like to be a locomotive engineer on the ground at BNSF. This inevitable nationwide railroad strike is not about money. It is about dignity and the balance of a fair work life. Being subject to working 90% of the time is not what we signed up for. We signed up for a 75% availability policy, which is insane and speaks to me of a lack of organization in the company. For every 1 day that I take off unpaid, it takes me 14 continuous working days to earn it back. Do that math. That is our so-called sick time. If you want to remain employed, you better not take more than 1 day off a month, and you most definitely better not miss a call or get into accidents on the way to work. That will eat half of your lifetime points and will take you 6 months to gain back from continuous day after day working events. Understand that we do not have set days off a month like most all other jobs. We do not have weekends. We do not have a routine or accurate schedule. Every day is the same for us. We never know when we will be going to sleep on any given day or night. 40 hours a week does not apply to us. That sounds horrific. And pretending that it's not, pretending that that has to be the way that people do business is a joke. And it speaks to a lack of planning by the people that are running BNSF. That tells me that they have no clue what they're doing if they think that that's a normal way of doing business, if they can't take workers' well-being into account at all. I mean, there's even more horrible reports, people losing connections with family, people losing fiancés, people taking tons and tons of caffeine. The Vice story has more on that, but it is horrific. All right, let's talk about a quote-unquote do-gooder billionaire. So Mike Cannon-Brookes, based in Australia, is worth $17 billion from software, and he's done two good things, and he's claiming that he's going to give away his money. I think this is always a very important point, and it goes on to Yvon Chouinard. Somebody talking to the news about how they're going to give their money away is not the same thing as them giving their money away. And it's also very important to understand how weird and fluctuating their billions of dollars are, and how hard it is to track where that money actually is and how much they own. So he's done two okay things. A 2017 online bet with Elon Musk prompted Tesla Incorporated to install the then world's biggest battery farm in South Australia, which helped to keep moving and the energy sector forward. How they got the mining for all the materials and all of that stuff, not necessarily something that was on the plate. Another good thing, Mike Cannon-Brookes became the firm's top shareholder of AGL, a 185-year-old utility that was one of Australia's biggest polluters, and was forced in May to abandon a strategy that would have kept coal-fired power plants running for about 2 more decades because of him buying stock and forcing them out. All right. The thing that's important to recognize is a lot of people that weren't billionaires have gotten power plants shut down, including those of us in Colorado Springs who got the Drake power plant shut down early. Having billions and billions of dollars helps, but I don't like us being at the whim of whether somebody wants to be a truly evil villain or not. Anyway, I hope he does give away his money like he's trying to say he will, but we will always see. It's always up in the air. Also, I'm going to try to avoid Elon Musk. He came up here, but I'm just going to try to avoid him because most of what he does is just fucking with people. It's like feeding a troll. All right, let's get to Yvon Chouinard. He was born in 1938. He's 83 years old. He was born in Maine. He was a rock climber, and then he started the outdoor industry business, Patagonia. He's married to his wife since 1971, Melinda Penover, and they have a son, Fletcher, and a daughter, Claire. So one thing that he does is tithing for the environment, committing 1% of sales or 10% of profits, whichever is the greatest, to the environment. Now, part of this is I want to compare this to what's happened with the stock market, and how much corporations have to pay in terms of corporate taxes. So let me go and look. So first off, right now, the United States imposed a tax on profits of U.S. resident corporations at a rate of 21%. That's reduced from 35% by the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And it's also really important to note that there are lots of write-offs that can happen for that profit. And so we don't always know. And now I want to look about like a New York Times article looking at how they're counting their profits. So Chouinard, I think, is planning to, and we'll get into what he wants to do with the business. So he accumulated a lot of money. And so if he was so focused on giving all that money to the environment, how did he accumulate $3 billion? I think that's important to talk about because when you accumulate that much money, you do it for a reason. And I think it informs how he decided to structure what he's doing with his company. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Patagonia, working there according to what's been useful and what's been not so useful. So in a Glassdoor review, they've got like a 4.4 on Glassdoor. So I always want to talk about this is supposed to be like an ideal company. And in this review, this person said, most people I know feel under-resourced and underpaid. There's not much motivation to pay top wages since so many people want to work for the company, and many people feel that they are working the job of 1.5 to 2 people. Burnout ensues and they leave. The idea behind the book, Let My People Go Surfing, might only apply to the smallest group who work in Ventura. It also feels like there's very little opportunity for advancement. People are encouraged to apply to new roles over and over again, and it causes frustration, which leads to people leaving also. It also feels like you're boxed in by your role and under so much bureaucracy to get anything change for the better. I've also I read some reviews and people were saying that DEI, like diversity, equity, inclusion, was bad. It's supposedly getting better according to newer reviews. So their advice to the management, my suggestion in 2022. My suggestions would be understand your employees better, their backgrounds, and help them advance within the organization. I've seen employees with advanced degrees and amazing experience from other organizations working retail and customer service jobs to get their foot in the door only to give up and leave because they felt abandoned and not given a chance for advancement. Pay your employees better than the market rate. Yes, you have an endless supply of people lined up to work for you. Please don't take advantage of it. Hire more people if needed. No one should feel under-resourced, especially after that last couple of years working from home. Update your benefits and perks. That was also something that came up. Thank you for being a leader in areas of schooling and childcare for on-site workers. That was revolutionary and inspiring. Please, what else can you do now? And then across, create more equality across teams, divisions, and locations. Look to roll out a 980 work schedule to everyone, not just some teams. Help to create support and collaboration between offices and companies. And I've spoken to teams at various locations outside of Ventura HQ, and they feel they are left to sink or swim on their own. So this is kind of in contrast to what they've done to make sure that the people creating Patagonia products are taken care of well. So let me go to that article because I want to find it. I know I've got, you guys, I have too many tabs open for this. But so what I do want to give credit to for Patagonia is that they're an accredited and founding member of the Fair Labor Association. And that's an important point because I think that is something that I point out a lot. What is your company actually doing in terms of how it creates its products? And so I found a 2015 Atlantic article that looked at what they have done. They were able to make sure that their first tier of people the factories that cut, sew, and assemble Patagonia's products are pretty good, that they make sure that they weed out wage abuses, overtime abuses, and health and safety violations. So since 2007, they've done that among that first-tier supplier with whom they have a direct relationship. The company has whittled down the number of first-tier suppliers it works with to 75 from around 108. So that's great. And I think this is really important, they then audited themselves to make sure that their second-tier, the mills that take raw materials and produce the fabrics and other parts that later become jackets, backpacks, and so on, are done without trafficking and exploitation. So about 1/4 of those mills are based in Taiwan, and the majority were found to have instances of trafficking and exploitation. And I think that's important. However, and this is an important point, this is a private company. They get to share what they want to share without having transparency the way that a government has to have. So Patagonia would not share the official audit documentation with me. The company in Verite, an NGO that is working with companies in the U.S. State Department to tackle these issues, did provide me with details of their findings and its plans to rectify the situation in the supply chain. And that's, that's part of it. It's like they're not our saviors. They can have a pretty ethical business, and they aren't going to share all the details. And they aren't going to share the official documentation because they're a private business, and they don't have to, and they are not our gods. So I also wanted to talk about, and I'm not sure if I have, what it means. He's done this 1% thing where it's 1% of sales or 10% of profits, whichever is the most, has been given to the environment. However, I want to point out that corporate taxes were cut in 2017 so that corporations, the profits of U.S. resident corporations, are taxed at a rate of 21% versus 35% by the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So they are paying a lot less in taxes, a lot less than they paid in the 1950s, and there's a lot more funky accounting that can happen with that. And again, it's a private company, so what's written off, what's put on a different account on a different shore, in the end, they were able to they make about $1 billion in sales a year, and he's giving, according to like his succession plan, about $3 billion in turning it into a trust. So how did he accumulate all of that money if his goal was to give it all away to the environment? And I think at the root of it, despite wanting to be super ethical, despite wanting to be the good guy, and we're going to look at the New York Times article, in the end, he was uncomfortable giving up his power and his money. So there's a New York Times article, and they interview other people in his orbit. And I think it's important to look at the people that are interviewed that are close to him. There's Dan Mosley, who's a partner at BT& Company, which is a merchant bank that works with ultra-wealthy individuals, including Warren Buffett, who helped Patagonia design the new structure for the business and had the big headline of him giving away all of his money. And then also his closest advisor, including his closest advisors, and that includes Ryan Geller, the company's chief executive, and which is a guy who relies on him for his job. And that's the heart of it. These are the people around him, and they are reliant on him for their money and their livelihood. And they automatically have egos about it. When you are a billionaire, everybody around you is a person that could have ulterior motives. Now, is that the case to a smaller degree in life? Yes, but not to the same degree is a person that can make or break your entire humanity. So they had a few other ideas of what to do. They were thinking that they could maybe make it owned by the people that work there. They could sell it. Ultimately, they decided not to do that because they were worried it would lack integrity and make it go public. They didn't. Yeah, so what they did decide to do is just make it into a trust. So they're now making it the Hold Fast Collective, which will distribute Patagonia's profits. Mr. Chouinard said much of the focus will be on nature-based climate solutions, such as preserving wild lands. And as a 501c4, the Hold Fast Collective will also be able to build on Patagonia's history of funding grassroots activists. But it could also lobby and donate to political campaigns. All things that could be good. I did look at the grants that it's given out. A lot of them are very close to Ventura County or in Ventura County, which is already a very wealthy area. So the people that are getting the money may not be the communities that need the money most. I just wanted to bring that up. And then another important point is that Daniel Hemmel brought up in a Twitter feed, and then was picked up by bigger, in a Twitter thread, and was picked up by other companies. Was this: the Chouinards appear to be getting essentially the same tax benefit for giving their Patagonia shares to a 501c4 as Seid got from giving his Trip Light shares to Leonard Leo's 501c4. Both are avoiding taxes on unrealized gains, but not claiming an itemized deduction. And I wanted to just say Daniel Hemmel teaches tax and torts at NYU Law. But making almost the exact same move as Seid, the Chouinards are reducing their gift tax liability by 98% and avoiding income tax on any capital gains and dividends from Patagonia that flow into the C4. I happen to share the Chouinards' political views and not Seid's, so in that sense there's a difference. But it can't be that when liberals avoid gifts and income taxes by transferring shares to a C4, it's no tax benefit, while when conservatives do the same, it's an unusual series of transactions that appear to have avoided tax liabilities. In one case, it's climate philanthropy, in another, it's dark money. Note that the phrase dark money never appears in the Patagonia story. And then according to some reports, they may be saving $700 million in tax breaks. And that's important because that's something that they may have been doing all along, especially looking at Dan Mosley being the person that helps that works with ultra wealthy individuals. So they may have been avoiding taxes all along, thinking that they have the better sense of what to do with their money. And that's a lot of hubris. The one thing that I will say is Chouinard's children did not want the company, and I think that speaks to them having integrity. However, because this is a trust, they'll have access to all that money and to what goes on with it. And so again, like I wanted to point out in with the other special billionaire, Mike Cannon-Brookes, we have to see what really happens with the money before we start clapping so hard. And so somebody pointed out that there is a distinction. Johnny Frontier said, I think the distinction is Seid's company was immediately sold, so there was true tax avoidance. Don't see anywhere that PATA will be sold. So that's a different comparison. But again, I mean, this is avoiding any inheritance tax. So what do we get from here? We get that we don't really know everything about their finances. They're semi-transparent, more transparent than most, a better company than most. One thing that I also wanted to refer to is that the reason why Chouinard wanted to do this was that he just wanted off of the list of billionaires. He didn't like being called a billionaire. He talked about how I drive an old car, I don't spend money, and it's like you can live the life of a person that doesn't have a lot of money, and yet when you put all your money in trust to do what you want to do with it, you are retaining your power and your control over that money and your influence in the world. And so you're still in that billionaire area. So I guess I cannot invite him on until we see that that money is really being distributed. And I think it's sort of important to talk about that one Glassdoor review where it talks about how, some people at the upper echelons can go surfing and do what they want, but other people really can't and are working 1.5 to 2 jobs a person. And being a billionaire, being a person, you are skewed by the people that you hang out with. It's especially true with a billionaire because everybody is so reliant on you. Having that much influence when you are so limited in your own perspective, just like every one of us is, not that, oh, if I had $1 billion, no, I just shouldn't have $1 billion. It makes it so that you just can't see everything. You can try really hard, and I think he's done better than many, better than most, but most are like extremely awful, but he's still hanging on to the money. He's not giving it away. We'll see what happens. We'll wait and see. So I wanted to highlight a couple of people that are doing the hard work, that are the regular people. I think what happens is, and there was kind of a good, oh God, I will put it in the bottom link, but there is a good point about. All right, so my audio is being funky. Let's finish as strong as we can. Anyway, conservatives, a thought that I think Innuendo Studios brought up before is that conservatives love hierarchy. They want the people at the top to be our betters. I mean, isn't that a comforting thought that the people that have the most money and power are the right people to have the most money and power? I mean, I wish that was true. I feel like anybody that's read about kings and queens and what royal life was like and what, has watched Succession will understand that that's not the case and that it doesn't select for people necessarily being good or kind or super intelligent or insightful. Anyway, I would like to go along and talk about how that also robs people that are doing really cool things of being heard out. And so I want to bring up a couple of people that are doing some cool stuff right now. So Queens, New York City Council member Julia Wan, whose district comprises the eastern approaches to this bridge, criticized an agency after participating in a walkthrough with DOT Commissioner Idanis Rodriguez and staffers from the offices of Councilmember Julie Menine and Sylvina Brooks Powers, who heads the council's transportation committee. One specifically said she was appalled that Rodriguez and other DOT officials continued to argue that the agency needed to stall its conversion of the south outer roadway from a car lane to a dedicated pedestrian lane because of ongoing renovation work on the bridge. requires all available lower levels for inbound and outbound cars. I'm just happy to see a councilwoman out there advocating for pedestrian walkways. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to Shiva Raj Bandhad. Shiva Raj Bandari. I'm sorry if I'm totally hurting your name. He's 18 years old. He's a high school senior in Idaho, and he won a school board seat against Stephen Schmidt, who was associated, though did not fully endorse, the Liberty Dogs, who say they were founded because of the spread of Marxism and have accused librarians of providing students with pornographic books and promoted book bannings. So let's hear a little bit more about Shiva. He's a climate and gun violence prevention activist, and he's protested state policies aimed at restricting what students can learn. In 2021, Governor Brad Little signed a law that blocks funding for schools that compel students to personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to the idea that only sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior, and that individuals, by virtue of sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin, are inherently responsible for actions committed in the past by other members of the same group, whatever. The state also created a task force to look into indoctrination in public schools in Idaho. Anyhow, he explained why he wanted to run for office, and there's a very good reason, and I'm happy he took their bait. He said, "We came into English class last year and had an assignment that was all blacked out with a Sharpie like a CIA document due to policies stemming from the Idaho Indoctrination Task Force. We were fighting in the legislature and media and organizing. A lot of the teachers said they felt isolated and alone in this fight against some of the most powerful people in our state. Students are the primary stakeholders in our education, and we were being treated as a nuisance, and that's when I knew there was a dynamic that needed changing." So those are two people, Shiva and Julia Wan, who are doing cool things in the world, and I think we need to celebrate them and celebrate how much work it takes to actually stand up, to point out what is wrong, to run for office, to be clear about the policies that we're after. And then I wanted to also talk a little bit about transportation and the concept of jaywalking. I'm going to link to, this is linked from a Just for Bikes episode about being a pedestrian, but I think it's really important to understand that in the past, and now in a lot of European countries, jaywalking wasn't a thing. It became a thing because of cars being deadly, and it became easier to blame people individually for getting hit by cars than deal with the fact that cars were coming into a previous system that allowed people and wagons and trains and various other streetcars to cross through in a safe way where people were able to just cross the street wherever they wanted. And I think it's really important for us to notice the ways that we become really car-centric and to understand ways that we can fix our neighborhoods by looking at accidents that involve pedestrians, not as people making a big mistake by crossing in the wrong place, but by the street not being a safe spot by not giving good information about where people cross. And this is especially important in El Paso County, which, while it did have a decrease in deaths in 2020, from 85 deaths in 2020 to 77 in 2021, we still lead the state in traffic fatalities, and we had 17% more crashes than Denver, the next closest county in terms of population. So let's start getting better at making it possible for people to cross streets and to realize that how we frame issues is really important. I'm working on that with some local community members. Hopefully we will be successful. Obviously, all work is ongoing. We can't claim victory until we have policies in place, and so far we do not. Another interesting thing that came up was the Dutch method for red lights. It uses phases, so you might one side crossing before the other and planning like exactly how much time it takes to cross the street for a person or a car, instead of our way where it's like a little bit extra, so people can always be like, well, I have a little extra time, I'll just try to make this light, and then we end up in the crosswalk and hurting people. And another cool thing is raising crosswalks so that they are level with the sidewalk. Instead of us having to go down into the street has to go up into the sidewalk, and it's a physical marker that says that this is a pedestrian area. Another thing is putting lights on the same side as the cars, instead of across the street, because it means that people don't end up in the crosswalk the same way. Again, a lot of the time we want to blame people for things, and if we create a better built environment, people don't necessarily make the same mistakes. They don't kill the same number of people. I will link to various resources below. I'm really grateful for your time here. Let's keep looking out for good policy that can make lives better. And if you have any good policy that you want to recommend to me, please, 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 please recommend. I would be so grateful. I've been looking. I really want some like clean, nice policy changes that can make real shifts in our systems. I think so often we look at the people with the most money and the most influence as the exciting ones, and they just happen to have the most power. It doesn't mean they're the most innovative. They got there, they got to where they wanted to go because they were able to work the system. The people that were able to work the system the best are probably not the people that are going to be changing the system the best, because that would threaten their success. Anyway, I hope you have a great day, and I hope more billionaires actually give away their money. Let's keep track of those two that we did talk about. See if they actually follow through and make sure that they pay their taxes. And have a great day. All right. Bye-bye.